All right.
Yay!
Yay! Thank you, Glenn, for that really fascinating presentation.
Oh, it's timely, I think.
Yes, definitely.
You could say I had a calling to do it.
Wah, wah, wah. So, anyway,
Anyway.
we have a lot of people to thank. We are already at 15% of our goal. That is so exciting. So I want to thank a few of our most recent donors. Let's take a look at the leaderboard now. So I would like to thank Chris Cree for entering our raffle for the Mystery History Basket and a virtual membership, and to move the beeper bar. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Anonymous has entered for the candlestick holder raffle. Thank you so much, Anonymous. We also have the Wilkins family who donated $50. Thank you so much. And the Wilkins family said, your summer camp programs and the Young Historians Homeschool Group have been an absolute joy for our son, Benjamin. We love Benjamin!
Yay!
Our family thanks you from Pennsylvania and hopes that we can someday visit in person. Oh, that would be so
We would
cool.
love that.
We would be
Absolutely.
so happy.
Victor Lawrence donated $51, saying Northeast Georgia History Center is the best. Thank you, we agree. And Jeff Pardue, thank you so much for your $100 donation, saying a gym in North Georgia. Keep up the great work. Thank you,
Thanks, Jeff.
everyone. And let me make sure that we're not missing anyone.
And
else.
while you're looking, Libas, someone had asked me, are these donations tax deductible? Actually, they are.
Great.
Because we are a bona fide certified 501c3 nonprofit corporation in the state of Georgia. So your donations to us can be tax deductible. Please discuss with your financial advisor or tax preparer to determine how and how much.
Indeed.
That's the legal mumbo jumbo. But
Yes.
we are a 501c3. So most, if not all, depending upon how you give of your donation, is tax deductible.
All right, so thank you everyone for your donations so far. It's so awesome that we are already 15% to our goal of $3,000. So up next, we are going to have a sewing lesson with Marie. So,
Yay.
oh no,
So
Glenn,
what?
Glenn, look what you've done. So, if you would like to practice hand sewing, all you need is fabric, thread, and a needle. So
That's all we need for this lesson.
yeah, we'll need just a few moments to get set up for that. So please stay with us and learn some basic hand stitches that will also be implemented in the apron that Marie will be finishing up later and is part of our raffle. Speaking of raffle, if you check our program, which I'll put a link into the chat right now. If you check our program, we have all of our raffle items available to look at there. So choose which one you want. Make sure that you include in your message which raffle you are buying the ticket for. There we go. Trying to do a million things at the same time. And without further ado, let's get set up for our sewing by hand for beginners. So here we go. We'll be back in just a few moments. Just going to set up our camera for Marie's sewing lesson. All right, here we go.
I'll
One
appear
second.
momentarily.
Just kidding. Let's see here. Poof! There we go.
Hello!
And now the magic. Boom!
Ooh.
So everyone can see how the magic happens.
Yes. Oh, you can't see that this says sewing.
Yes.
Or can you?
Oh,
That's
it's green.
green.
That's funny. But don't worry, folks. It says sewing.
It does say sewing.
So Marie, tell us about what we are going to learn today in our sewing lesson.
Yeah, so we are going to be learning some simple stitches. Some of the stitches that we have been doing, that we're going to be doing today, we have done in a previous live stream, but they're such good basic stitches that we're going to show them again because some of you might be new and we don't want you to miss out on some of these really good stitches. And then we're also going to be learning some new stitches as well. So in this program, I will be going over the running stitch, which is like the most basic of basic stitches, the whip stitch, which I just think is fun because it's so easy to do, and it gets the job done so fast. You know, you're whipping that stitch out. We are also going to be doing the back stitch. Now this one's a little bit different than ones that we had done previously, and it's one of the strongest hand sewing stitches that you can do, which is fantastic for historical sewing. And then we're also going to be doing the hem stitch, which we will be doing so much of while making the apron. All right, so without further ado, I have my fabric here. Now I'm going to cut the fabric a little bit so it is easier to manage while doing that. So one of the things that I think gets underrated in sewing is not just the needle and thread, it is also like and like moving the needle and thread through the fabric. Like that is like I guess the verb of sewing, but making a garment, there's so much more that goes into it. There's the choosing of the fabric, the cutting of the fabric, ironing, so much cutting, patterning, and that all goes into making a garment. And I thought, you know what? We should see all of it. So I'm going to cut some of the fabric here. So we're just going to be doing a basic stitch, a few basic stitches. So I'm just going to make like a little cut on a square here. If we need to, we can measure it out. We're going to let's do an 8 by 8 square. So here's one of the 8. All right, then we're going to go up here. So I put my pin like through my tape measure because then it stays and it's fantastic. So I like thinner tape runners where I can do that. All right, I'm gonna stand, but you can still see the fabric. Boop, 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 boop. Cut, 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 cut. All right, and then we're going to turn here at the 8 inches. Now another thing that you can do with some fabric, let's see if we can do it with this fabric. And sometimes you can just make like a little snip there, and then you can just tear it. And that way you have a very, very straight line. So yeah, this fabric is great. It tore very easily. So that's one way, and a historical way to get a very straight line versus cutting. But I think we did a pretty good job of getting our straight line cutting too. All right, so we're going to move that over here just a little bit. Ooh, it is unraveling a little bit, so we're going to cut our threads. There's one, I think, of my least favorite things about sewing is cutting threads. It's so tedious and annoying, but it's something that must be done or else you just get threads everywhere, and that's also annoying. Now, let's get some of our pink thread. Now, usually you want thread that matches your fabric, so kind of like this here. This one was an interesting one. This is our fabric that's going to be for the apron later. This is here to entice you to come back and to enter the raffle. So here we have a blue thread that matches some of the blues in this fabric because it is a checked fabric, so you have to choose one of the colors. You can't choose just, it's not like it's a black piece of fabric, so you would use black thread. But for today's purposes, I want you to be able to see the stitches that I'm doing, so I'm going to be using pink thread on black, so that way you can definitely see what I'm doing. Now, we have a lot of needles here at the History Center. We have like almost no pins, but we have a lot of needles. from our sewing supplies. So I'm going to look for a good needle. Now, there are so many different kinds of needles. So here we can see, here are repair needles. They're kind of like, some of them are much longer and some of them are even rounded. So those are very fun, but not what we need today. We also don't need giant needles. We just need a nice small needle to do these stitches. All right, I'm going to go, this is the needle that I have selected. This nice little needle. Now, a difference between, like I said, we have a lot of needles, but not many pins. The difference between a pin and a needle is a needle has a little eye here, like a little tiny hole. I cannot see through. My eye is just like, this doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so it has a little eye of the needle, and that is the difference. And a pin usually has like a head to it, so it doesn't travel through the fabric. So this is a pin because it has a nice little, mine have pink. So it has a nice little shiny bulb at the top, and a needle just has an eye at the top. So that eye is what we are going to put the thread through. Now, threading a needle can sometimes be very aggravating. I always recommend to get a nice clean cut on that thread, because otherwise you'll get like a couple of strands of the thread through, and that is just very annoying. Also, I have like a little piece of fuzz right there at the end, even though I did a clean cut. We're gonna get it, there we go. All right, now we're going to thread the needle. Now, there are many different ways to secure the thread once you have threaded the needle. I personally, a lot of people, they'll just like, they'll have like a little bit of a tail here, and then just cut the thread to where it's needed. I accidentally pull my needle out of my thread, and then you have to rethread the whole needle, so I don't do that. I actually take this side of the thread, and then I do it lengthwise, and that also makes your thread stronger because it's like two strands instead of one. And sometimes that's good for projects, sometimes it's not, so use your discretion when you're doing different projects. But I honestly like this one better because then you can't accidentally pull the thread out of your needle and then spend like half your time actually rethreading versus actually sewing. So I do it to where you tie the two ends together. So we have the two ends of the thread here. I'm not sure if you can see that. There we go. Okay. So and then I just tie them together so we make a knot at the end of our thread. And this is nice because instead of making a knot within a thread itself, I usually do 2 or 3 knots because I just get nervous. I don't want it to pull out. All right, there we go. We got a good strong knot there. So if you don't knot your thread at the end, then you'll go right through the fabric, and there won't be anything to catch there, because you need your knot to basically fill the hole that your needle is making. Otherwise, this doesn't work that way. All right, so I think the first stitch that I said I was going to do is a running stitch. So a running stitch is a very basic stitch where you're just going from one side of the fabric to the other. So we're going to label this like the top side of my fabric. I'm going to put a pin in this one just so that we know, because this one doesn't have like a pattern or anything. It looks the same on both sides. Sometimes you can tell the sides of your fabric easier because there will be like the top, what would be called like the fashion fabric or the fashion print, and then it'll have a back. So usually on some fabric you can tell easier, but this one you can't. So that way I have labeled the one with the pin, this nice little pink bulb. This is the front of my fabric, and this is my back of the fabric. So when I say front and back, we know which one I am talking about. So a running stitch just travels from the front to the back, from the front to the back, from the front to the back. And I'm going to do this very, very slow. I'm going to try to hold it up here, which usually I wouldn't do. Usually I sit here and do it like this. Oh, actually I can do it like this because we have just zoomed in.
Super zoom.
Woo! Okay, so I don't have to try to hold it awkwardly. So for this, we're going to start right here at the edge of the fabric. Of course, now this is my top side, and I don't want my knot to show on the top side, so I'm going to go in from the back. Right, so I'm going to start right here at the edge. So I'm going to show you from the other side. So this is the back side, and we're just going to pull it through. All right, and then see my thread has caught on that nice knot that I made. So it is now secure. All right, now I have all of my thread on the top of my fabric here. Now for a running stitch, I'm just going to go straight back through, back to the other side, just like so. All right, and we have just made a stitch, right? Perfect. Okay, now we're going to go from the back to the front, just like so. And it doesn't truly matter. You want them to be about evenly spaced, about the same size, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And stitches are kind of like snowflakes, where they're all unique and they're all different. And that is okay, as long as they hold. Of course, once you've been sewing a long time, they start to look more like a sewing machine stitch, and be very even and very the same size, which is great, but sometimes not. All right, so see what I'm doing here? I'm just from the front, give it a little space, and then pull back to the back. All right, now I'm going to show you a shortcut way to do that. So, you know, my needle has been traveling from the front to the back, to the front, to the back, from the front to the back, from the front, from the back. What if, so we're doing the same idea of this motion, of this front to back motion here. But we're just going to stay here at the front, because this is where my fabric is, right? And then I'm not going to push my needle all the way through, okay? I'm just going to dip my needle into the fabric, okay? It's about halfway through. All right, and then I'm just going to motion my needle up and push it through here and do that same thing. So I'm just going to tip my fabric, and the fabric might bunch up, that's okay. We're going to pull it out, push it through. We're just kind of like folding the fabric onto the needle, all right? So I just did that 3 times, and then I'm going to pull the needle through. All right. Look at that. We just made some really big running stitches. But for the apron today, we're going to be gathering, we're going to be using a running stitch to gather, which I will explain in just a moment. Which makes that so much faster, because instead of having to pull it all the way through and all the way back, I was able to just stay on one side and get 3 stitches done so fast. So that again. And this is also when we're not really caring about what they look like, because they're going to be covered later, because I'm gathering. So this is like a gathering running stitch that we're going to be doing right here. So see, I'm just dipping the needle halfway in. I'm not even taking it all the way to the other side. See, my needle is halfway through the fabric. I'm then going to push it up through the fabric there, see? So that'll be the stitch. Back down, and then over, and then down, and then over. And then we're going to pull through all these. Woo! All right. See? Okay. We're going to make it all the way to the other side. So I'm going to show you how I did the fast gathering running stitch. One more time. So we're going to dip in halfway through the fabric. See? Needle halfway through. All right. And then we're just going to take the needle here. Oh, can you see the back side? Where's the back side? Oh, there it is. Okay. Hello. It's going to come through the back here. Push it through. All right. Ooh, that's a little bit big. There we go. Back through there. All right. And then dip in, and then come up, and dip in, and then come up. And then we're going to pull it. All right. So doing it with that technique, you don't have as small of stitches. I mean, you can. I chose not to, because we only have so much time to talk about hand sewing, and we have still 3 more stitches to do. So here we are with a running stitch. All right. Not exactly the most even things in the world, but they'll do. They're even enough. Now to gather these running stitches. So this running stitch I have just done on 1 layer of fabric, right? And that makes it really easy to gather because I'm just going to pull this end here with all that has the rest of my thread connected to my needle. I'm going to pull that gently. Whoop. And that is how you gather things. See, so I just took all those stitches, it's on a line here, and I gathered it. And that, one more time, is. Whoop. And that's how you gather things. So now I gathered all of this 8 inches that we have, into about, I can tell you exactly, about 2 1/4 inches. So we just made 8 inches disappear into 2 1/4. Look at that. So this is great. I use this on so many dresses. All of those dresses, with basically every dress that has like a very long full skirt, it is either gathered or it is pleated. Oh, pleats would be a good thing to talk about. If we have time, we might get to pleats at the end. So this is how a gathering of a running stitch works. You just pull the thread and just push the fabric down on that thread line. All right, now I'm going to ungather it so that we can see the running stitch. Because I am going to use this piece of fabric to show a couple other of our stitches. Now I'm going to cut my thread, and I'm going to tie this off so it'll be all nice and pretty and done. All right, another thing about this, having the 2 thread method of putting your needle, of threading your needle with these like 2 strands of thread, is that you can then tie them together to make your knot. All right. Knot is secure. I'm going to trim these threads. All right, I have a little pile of threads over there. All right, there we go. Now we're going to turn to, actually we have the pin on this side. We're going to turn to this side. Now, what was the second one I think I was going to say? I think I said I was going to do a whip stitch. Now a whip stitch requires 2 pieces of fabric, so actually we might get to that later. We're going to talk about a hem stitch right now, or actually a back stitch. Which one would be best next?
What's the difference?
So a hem stitch is when we're making a hem. So it's would be when we're going to fold the fabric up like this. In the 18th and usually 19th century, you do like a double folded hem, but they would be very narrow because you don't want to waste that much fabric, but you want to still make a hem. And then I'm just finger pressing it here. So you can't exactly see it. You can see a little bit of the depth, but that would be a hem. And then a hem stitch would go around to secure the hem that we have just folded. A back stitch is a very strong stitch, which usually you see around like arm circles and the crotches of pants, places that have a lot of like pull to them where the body is movement, so you see them around joints, and that because it's a very strong stitch. And usually it could be used to, usually it would be used to make 2 fabrics join, but we can also do it just on 1 piece of fabric. Whip stitches also could be done on 1 piece of fabric, but it just makes more sense to do them around the 2. So let's do a back stitch on this side of the fabric. So to do a back stitch, again, I'm going to make a nice little knot in my thread here. All right, so this is my top side of the fabric, so I'm going to come in from the bottom, so my knot is hidden in the bottom, but I want to get close to the edge. All right, so now for a back stitch, I am going to come in at an angle right where the stitch is that I did. So I'm going to come in at an angle. I'm actually going to come a little bit behind it, and then kind of like that motion that I did when I was doing the running stitch, where I don't take the full needle back and front. I just take it, it's on the front, I dip into the back, and then I come front here again, and then I'm going to pull that through. All right. And I don't want it to pull too hard because otherwise it might accidentally gather my fabric, and I don't want to do that. All right, so now you see I have this one little tiny stitch here. And back stitches, they can be vary in sizes. Mine apparently are going to be very, very small. So this is where my fabric, this is where my stitch has come through on my fabric right here. And then this is the stitch that I've just created. And there is a gap between it. And I don't want a gap between those two. Back stitch is really, it's kind of like a chain stitch almost. They'll all be connected. So unlike a running stitch that has gaps between each of the stitches on each side, a back stitch does not. So a back stitch, I'm going to come here where this ends, where the gap is, and I'm going to fill the gap. So I'm going to come from the gap. I'm going to come to the side where the stitch already is. And then I'm going to do the same thing where I dip into the fabric. So the point of my needle is back there. And then I'm going to come, because my stitches are so tiny right now, I'm actually going to come do like a stitch and a half. So I just came in, and then I'm going to end, let's see. Here we are, because I also want it to be big enough for y'all to see. All right, so I have 2 stitches here. They look really tiny, but they're there. And then I have this larger gap because I realized you need to be able to see a little bit better. So when we have this larger gap here where this thread is at the end. All right, so we see that gap, we're going to fill that gap. To fill that gap, we will take the needle and the thread, and we're going to go in. So see the back stitch, and it's called a back stitch because I am going back. I am going to fill it up. So we're going to come through where that last stitch was, where the last stitch ended. I'm going to go in there. All right. So see where that last stitch ended? We're going to take this thread back and fill up that gap. So we're going to push that, do that thing where we do a dip. All right. And then we have to decide where we want that thread to come out. We want that thread to come out on the other side of where this thread is. So we're kind of making a loop that goes around this thread. All right, so, and that's where that comes out will be the size of our stitch. All right, so you see how that thread here is in the middle of where my needle is. So now I'm going to pull through my needle after I dipped it to the back, right? And this looks more like a sewing machine stitch that we're used to. It's a continuous stitch. They're all right there. See? So now we have here. So this is the loose end right here. And these are the 3 stitches that we have over here. And then they look all continuous. That makes it really easy to have a straight line. They're all just right there. Ooh, okay, we're good. I almost got a knot in my thread. Now, again, this is a little, I'm also trying to explain it very, very in depth, but it also takes it's a little longer than the running stitch because this one is so much stronger. All right, so we are going to fill in this gap that is right between this last stitch and this thread here. To do that, we are going to go in right at the end of that last stitch where that gap is. So we are, this to you, I think it's the left because it's mirror image, yes. Okay, so on the left of that gap, we're going to go in, and then we are going to come out. See where the needle is coming out here. This thread is in the middle. All right, and then we're going to pull it through. It makes that little loop, and then we're going to make the loop disappear. Okay, good. All right, but now we have another gap, and we have to fill that gap. So again, we're going to go to where that stitch was. Push down into there. All right, where this thread is here, that's going to be our middle. because then we have to make room for another gap on the side. All right, so this thread's in the middle. Needle has taken its form. We're going to pull it through. Come on, there we go. All right. Oop, I pulled a little too tight. All right, so that looks a lot more like a machine stitch that we're used to because they're all so close together. And then this is what the back looks like. It's also a continuous line. It's not as nicely, I guess, put together as the front. So you keep that in mind when you are sewing which side you want to have the prettier stitches on. But that is how this is going to go. I'm going to keep going just a little bit so that we can see a few more. I'm not going to explain it as much. Perhaps we can check the chat to see if we have any questions.
Yeah,
so
let's
far.
see how we're doing. And in the meantime, Marie, can you talk to us about when you began sewing and how long you have been making historic garments?
Yes. So I started sewing when I was a little girl, and I had American Girl dolls, and I think I wanted to make pillows for my American Girl dolls, and my mom made sleeping bags for them, and it was very cute. But I kind of started sewing, I guess you could say, like, for the dolls. My mom had always kind of, she had sewn. She made some of my Halloween costumes. She made different little outfits for my dolls, and it was, again, very cute. I had always been introduced to the idea of sewing, but it wasn't until middle school where I actually went to a sewing camp for a week in the summer with my cousin. And that is when I learned more about sewing, more about patterning, how to cut out a pattern and how to make things. And I made a lot of pillows. I made like a little quilt thing for my doll. And things like that. And then it was not long after that where I decided that I wanted to make a medieval dress because I thought that was super cool. And that went okay. It was wearable. The sleeves, we don't talk about them. But it was this pretty lavender princess dress. It was very basic. My mom tried to help me figure out how to read a commercial pattern. So Simplicity, Butterick, Vogue, McCall's, those are the ones that you can find in Joann's, even sometimes Walmart if they have a sewing section, and those what I call like the big patterns, and sometimes those patterns still don't make sense to me and I don't listen to them because sometimes you get more confused after reading the instructions than just doing what you innately think. It's kind of like a 3D puzzle, so I just kind of put together the puzzle. So I started doing that. It was not about the same time where I started to get into reenacting and giving tours at a historic home called Stately Oaks that's in Jonesboro, Georgia. And that's when I was like, wow, these historic costumes cost a lot of money and I don't want to pay that. So I'm going to make them myself. And I did. And I started off with mid-Victorian, which is about 1860s, 1850s, because that's what you wear when you go Civil War reenacting, which is a lot of the reenactments that we have in Georgia are indeed Civil War reenactments. So that's how I started getting into that. And then from there, I was like, ooh, but there are so many other fashion eras in history that are so interesting. So that's when I started getting more and more interested in different eras and then just investigating into them. So from the American Civil War, so 1850s, 1860s, I started getting really interested in American Revolutionary War because those are the other primary reenactments that we have in Georgia and historic sites. So that's when I started getting more into that, and then it just kind of exploded from there, especially because I'm also part of Atlanta Historic Dance, which is a historic dance company based out of Atlanta, and they do a bunch of different time periods. So when we started to get into a new dance, of course I had to make a new outfit. When we have a new event, I enjoy having a new outfit. Or I guess when we get into a new time period, you kind of have to have a new outfit because there are overlap that you can have, in the Regency, you can sometimes wear late Georgian things into the Regency because I've had these pants that I'm wearing since middle school. So people don't, just same as today. We don't just like throw out clothes because we're like, oh, it's not in style anymore. we keep things that are useful to us and that work. And people did that even more so throughout history, when fabric and the resources to make an outfit would be even harder than those that we have today. So I think in a nutshell, that's how I got into historical costuming and things of that nature. And then it really just kind of took off in the past couple of years, where I've been sewing more and more, and I have a whole YouTube channel called Historical Belle, where I talk about how I make dresses, and sometimes I kind of just have made dresses because I was like, I want to, and then I can show the internet how I do it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put a link to your Historical Belle YouTube. It's really great. I have enjoyed a lot of your videos. So let me put a link in the chat for our friends. And Marie, for those who are just learning how to sew, what do you think a good starter project would be for them?
Ooh, that's a good question. Pillows. I started by making pillows. It's basically you cut out a square and then you sew it to another square. And then you leave a little hole, and then you can put stuffing in it, and then you can fill up, and then you sew through that hole. That's how, I think that's like the easiest project to make. Pillows have been used throughout history for various reasons. So if you're concerned about it being a historically accurate pillow, you can research the history of pillows if you so desire. But people have been using pillows since forever. Just they stuff them with different things, and sometimes they're different sizes and shapes and have different purposes. But I would say if you are just learning how to sew, a pillow is a fantastic project, especially if you're doing it on machine. If you're doing it hand sewing wise, I caution you to make sure that your running stitches, they're good, it's fine to do a running stitch while making a pillow. You just need to make sure that your running stitches are not gigantic, because otherwise you might have stuffing that comes out. Back stitches would be fantastic for a pillow because you're not going to have stuffing come out through these, because there are no gaps. So I would say like this length of running stitches, fine for a pillow. These that I got over here when I was doing more of like a running stitch to gather, not so much. They're good for gathering. They're not good for necessarily holding things together. So I think we've made it about halfway across with the back stitch. I will go over the back stitch one more time, and then I think we will not conclude. We still have 2 more stitches to do. We will move on to the hem stitch. All right. So now that we have like this whole row of back stitches, it's easier to see how they're doing. I started talking, and then you can see where they started to veer a little bit because I wasn't focusing as much on the back stitch as I was on talking and telling you about sewing. So that's what happened there. Sometimes you can't do 2 things at one time. But so just to go over this one more time, the back stitch is really when you're going back to sew. You're taking the thread back and over. So we're filling in the gap. We're making like a little loop to fill in that gap of thread. So here is where the thread has come out. You see that long thing there. We're going to take this thread back to fill in the gap. To fill in the gap, we're going to go right next to this last stitch that we did here. We're going to go in. We're doing about halfway through, and then we're turning, and we're going sideways. And we're going sideways about halfway. So this thread here is in the middle of our needle, and then we're going to pull through horizontally and have that loop fill in there. Perfect. All right. So again, you can see where I started talking and I veered down, but then we even back out again. So that is the back stitch, which looks very different than a running stitch. Here we can see, oh, can we see both of them in the same frame? There we go. So again, very different. You can see how this one up here is going to be way stronger than the one down here, but both will hold fabric together. All right, I'm going to finish off that one. All right. That's not enough thread to do a hem stitch, so we're going to have to take that one out. Ooh, I got more thread attached to me. We're going to take that out, And I'm going to rethread my needle. I like to thread my needle a little bit longer because I don't like having to stop and rethread it every so often. Of course, with a longer thread, that means you have more possibility for it getting tangled. So if you are just beginning, I would recommend perhaps you want it to be long enough to where you don't have to stop and start and stop and start, because that would get just really annoying. You want to have enough to like complete the seam that you're going through. So usually to figure out how long you need a thread that you're going to be doing, you know, measure how long is the thing that you're going to be sewing. How long is the seam that you're going to be sewing? And then give it a little bit extra. So if I was actually going to be sewing this, I would be, just to do a hem on this, I would probably do yay amount of thread, but I don't like to thread my needle often, so I'm doing it that long. All right, so now we are going to do a hem stitch. So we're going to do it on this side. So this is our, remember this is our pretty side, this is our front side. So we're going to go to the back. We're going to do the back of the fabric. Now I'm going to fold this up once. And this is only like a 1/2 inch that I'm folding. There. Okay, and then I'm going to fold it one more time about the same length. So that way we have about 1 inch of fabric. Now, I'm going to use this as a weight for a moment. We're going to pin the hem, because otherwise it'll start to unroll, and we want to make sure it's all even. All right, so there we go, pin. Just sticking the pin into the fabric. We're doing like the same thing that we did the other time, where we stick the pin about halfway through, then we turn it, and then it comes back up to the top. All right, so now I have pinned my hem, which will make it easier to do the hem stitch, because I'm not trying to hold down this hem and hold it in place. The pins are going to do that for me. Now the hem stitch. Now this is a fun thing. So we're going to anchor the hem stitch, right? But we don't really want it, we don't want the knot to show on the front side of our fabric. So what we're actually going to do, we're actually going to go, you see this little roll here that we made with the hem? We're actually going to go, not to the outside, we're just going to go into that little roll right there. And we're going to go near the top of that roll, because that's where we're going to want to be. And then we're just going to just pull it through, just pull that stitch. And that way, that knot's going to be on the inside there, and it's not going to show on the outside of your fabric. Look, no knot, that's just a running stitch. So you can't even tell that we've made a stitch because it's invisible. Okay, so to do a hem stitch now, oop, I just poked myself. To do a hem stitch, it's going to be focused more on the side, on the back side where the hem is rolled. Well, actually, this isn't a rolled hem. This is like more like a folded hem. That was a whole different thing. Oh, can't get that. There we go. Okay, so to do a hem stitch, we are going to try to take the littlest. We're only going to like peek to the. Ooh, I'm just all over the place with my thread. Okay, do a hem stitch. We're going to just grab. We're going to start right here where this fold is, right? And we're going to just dip our needle, ever so tiny. So such a tiny dip into that fabric. Really, we only want to try to grab like a couple threads of that fabric, a couple of that weave. See how tiny that dip was that I did? You can barely see. There's like maybe 4 strands of woven fabric in that. So you see that little black spot on my needle? That's how much of the front that I took, that I dipped my needle into. Okay, so I dipped my needle. All right, and now I want to take just a little chunk of that fold. All right, and then pushing it through. And it's coming towards me. So towards me, towards my body. and then we're going to pull that all the way through. Oh, it got tangled, like I said it would, because it's longer. That's okay, we'll fix it. All right, so now we go to the front. You see how tiny that little prick is? That's how tiny we want the hem to be, because we don't want like a big attention drawn to the hem. We want just nice little finishing stitches on the hem. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take the needle and the thread. So we just ended right here, going through the fabric. So I'm going to go just right next to it, giving it like a little bit of a space. I'm going to give it maybe like a few centimeters. And then, because, you know, it's a hem, you don't need to secure it. You need to secure it, but it doesn't need to be like a back stitch kind of secure. So a couple of centimeters over, I'm going to go through. So I'm not going through the hem to get the little prick. I am going right next to the hem, almost behind the top roll of that hem, and then just pricking like just a couple threads, of the fabric, like the smallest amount of fabric that I possibly can. All right, so that's just one layer. That's just the top layer right there. All right, and now I'm going to take my needle, and I'm going to go through that roll of the hem that I created, and then push all the way through. So you can see here, that's a thread there. It has created this small stitch on the inside that kind of is it's not quite diagonal, but it's not exactly straight. It is kind of looping around here. So this is the stitch from the back of the hem, and then this is the stitch from the front of the hem. The front of the hem, they're much straighter, and there's really just like a little prick of thread showing through. Where on the inside, it's going to show more, and that's fine because it's the inside. No one cares. This is just facing your body. So I'm going to do the same thing where I take a small prick of the front fabric. I'm not going through the roll. I'm just going to the side where the front fabric is, right? And then I'm going to take a prick of the back of the roll. So I'm going through this top edge of the roll right here, this top roll. That's what I'm going to go through. So take a small prick of the front fabric. All right, and then a small prick, and then go through that top line of that roll and pull it through. So there we go. So this is what the stitch looks like on the inside, and that is what the stitch looks like on the outside. And we're going up between my two fingers right here. That's what that stitch looks like. Now, once you get a little better at it, you do those two pricks in one motion. So we're going to go a few centimeters over again. So I'm going to do a prick and then push through those two. And it goes a lot faster that way. And honestly, I think it's a little easier when you think about it as one motion, as opposed to two separate ones. It's a lot faster, definitely. But honestly, I think it's even a little easier. All right, so I'm going to do a couple of those so then I can show you what the line looks like. All right, so again, on the inside, we have more stitches. They're kind of a little wonky because they're going over the hem. But here on the back side, small little pricks. And that's what you want for a hem. And you'll see this is used on hems. I challenge you, if you go to an exhibit where they have old historic garments, look at the hems of the sleeves, look at the hems of the pants, look at the hems of the skirts, and you'll see it doesn't look like a running stitch like this. It looks like a little prick stitch like this, because that's what you do to hem. It doesn't make sense to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on a hem. It's way easier to just do like that little prick. Honestly, it probably saves more thread. All right, so now I've gotten to the point where I need to take out my first pin. So I'm going to do that. All right, so catch a couple threads of the outside that will show, come through that top stitch there, through the roll, and it pulls. All right, I'm going to do just a few more of this, and then we're going to move on to the whip stitch. Just want to get at least half of this, get it halfway across, so then you can have a better idea of what it looks like in its entirety.
Now, Marie, I'm sure you've gotten this question before about when you finish a garment, typically, I mean, how long does it take for you to complete a historic garment?
So that really depends on what garment we're talking about, because they're all unique and different, and some are far more labor intensive than others. How fancy is it? How much trim it is? I actually, and you'll see it later if you come to our historic fashion show, I just finished a cap. And it took almost as long to trim the cap as it did to make the entire cap. So here, see, look at those little pricks. Look at those little pricks of a hem. Look how cute they are. Look how different they are from the running stitch and from the back stitch. So these little pricks are far less noticeable than its other two companions, and that's why you want to do it on a hem. See, a back stitch like this, oh, where's the back stitch? Here's a back stitch like this, or a running stitch like this would be used on a seam. So you would never actually see this on the outside of a garment unless something went terribly wrong. The hem stitch like this, you will see this hem stitch on the outside of the garment. So you want it, you don't want that big line of thread going across the bottom of your dress. You want it to look discreet. So you have these little pricks. All right, the next one I'm doing is called a whip stitch, and it is most definitely one that you do when joining garments. So we're running out of time. I just like talking about sewing so much. But we have so much other fun stuff for y'all to watch and look at today as we are doing this amazing 24-hour telethon to raise money for the Northeast Georgia History Center. You can call the number below me or go to this link that's below right here to donate so that we can continue to do amazing programs like this and more that you will see today. I am so excited. We're already to 15.43% of our goal, which is absolutely amazing. We've only done really three programs so far. I think we've only been going for about 3 hours. Oh, it is almost noon. Time flies when you're having fun talking about history. Now, we are going to get one more 8-inch square. All right. So we're going to snip, and then this tore so easily, we're just going to tear it. All right, until we get to here, in which I will snip and then tear again. Snip. I didn't need to measure that because I'm going off of the other tear that I did. Ooh, whoops. There we go. Okay. Ta-da! We have another square. All right, so I'm going to join the two pretty sides together. So see, this is the front side, this is the front side. They will go together as I join them. I'm going to remove this pin. All right, so we're going to, they're not the same size anymore because I created a hem. That's okay. Ooh. All right, so now I'm going to pin these two sides together. right. And that way they just stay in place while I'm sewing and nothing gets cattywampus. All right. So a whip stitch. First, gotta make, there we go. So this is, the pretty sides are on the inside together. So now it really doesn't matter what side I start on because they are both going to be hidden. So I'm just going to start on the back side closest to me and then pushing out of the needle right here. All right, so a whip stitch is really fun. So we talked about how, you know, if this was a running stitch, we go from side to side to side to side. Well, with a whip stitch, we decided this one is our starting side, and then that means that we're only ever going to put the needle in from this side. So the side where my knot went in, my needle will never come through this way. It's always going to go out this way for a whip stitch, and that's going to bring the fabric over and loop over our seam right here. So for whip stitches, I like to make them pretty close together because why not? All right, so the only hard thing about whip stitches is once you get it going, it'll be fine. But starting out, you want to make sure that the thread is looping over your seam right here and not like the side, because that would just be a problem. All right, and then you want to pull that stitch. You don't want to like pull it to where it's gathering or puckering, but you want to pull it to where it's firm. You don't want like a loose thread. So see, that's a whip stitch right there. I just made it, it went over these two sides. All right, so my thread is ended on this side, but I'm not going to put my needle back in through this side. I'm taking it back over to that side, that first side where the knot is, and I'm pushing it out again. So see, there we go. Pushing it out and then pulling it over. All right. See, so now we have two whip stitches. They kind of look like they're going up and down instead of traveling this way, which is different than the other ones that we've done today, but makes it all the more interesting. So whip stitch, like I said, it's really easy. It goes really fast. This is one of my favorites because it just makes things so fast. And also it kind of like creates a clean edge. It finishes your edge off for you because it creates this, especially if you're doing it really close together, it finishes your edge. So this one, so these, the hem stitch is another one that it finishes the edge off. You don't have like raw edges showing or fraying. This was an unfinished edge right here with the running stitch because you can still see these kind of fraying ends. But a whip stitch, it just finishes off, I mean, it's not like a true finish, but I think it's close enough. Makes it a little bit nicer and it's fast. So we're just going in from the back every single time, pulling it through, and then making a nice little stitch. Go around. All right, I'm going to try to we have 6 more minutes.
Yes, and do stay tuned because our next program is going to be about the American Revolution with Glenn, and he's going to have some really cool reproduction items. Yeah. So you'll get to learn about the life of a revolutionary soldier, and you also have a chance to ask questions because this will be another live program. So please stick around. That will be next, the American Revolution with Glenn.
Yes, now one thing that is a little harder with whip stitches, you want to try to make sure they're all about the same length. So we can see that like here we're you don't want like one to start down here, one to start up here. So you want to make sure that they're all in a row. Of course you want that for like all stitches, but with whip stitches it can just be a little harder, so you have to think about it a little bit more. So there we go, we're doing whip stitches. I'm going to try to get it halfway down, so that way I can show you what the whip stitch looks like as you are joining these two pieces of fabric, what it looks like on the top side. Because right now these are all behind the seams views that we have here. This would not be a top view. So like this one, this is the back view of the hem stitch. This is the front view of the hem stitch. Very different. You have to, when you're thinking about sewing, especially with hand stitches, machine sewing, a machine stitch is a machine stitch is a machine stitch. They're all, I mean, unless you have a fancy machine that does cool stitches, they all pretty much look the same, front and back. But for hand sewing, it's very different what it might look like on the back side versus what it might look like on the front side. All right, we're almost halfway there. We're almost halfway there. There's a Revolutionary War soldier coming. But it's not the British. The British aren't coming. It's the Americans. All right, a few more stitches and then we'll be halfway done.
I'd also like to thank, we had a few people call in donations, and as 2 of them were anonymous, so thank you to those 2 anonymous donations, and to Matt for his donation. Thank you so much, Matt, for your $15 donation. We had 2 anonymous donations for $5. Every little bit helps, folks, so thank you so much.
You are helping us reach our goal. All right, so there we go. We have half of the whip stitches done. See how different all of these stitches are that we did today? They're all so different, but they're all hand stitches that you can use on your historical and modern garments. Now for the big reveal. I will show you what a whip stitch, what it looks like from the out. Yep, it looks like nothing. Except I'm pulling it apart a little bit there, so then you can kind of see the stitches. That's what you don't necessarily want that. You want to keep them a little tighter, so they don't look like a whole lot. But see, the problem with whip stitches is, and why usually you don't use them on a seam. That's why I was saying you want to make sure that they're all very close together on the same part. Otherwise, you will see them in the seam. And this is why they are for quick things where you don't necessarily need the need to see, because you will see them. So they aren't used a lot on seams of garments. A whip stitch, usually you would do like a running stitch, because if you do a running stitch and a running stitch, sometimes like that is even called like an English seam. It's like a slight variation of like a running stitch seam. But yes, so there we are. But whip stitches, they're really fast and really nice. Again, I'm pulling it apart here so you can kind of see what the stitches look like on the front. If I were doing this all really nice, neat and tidy, you would not necessarily see the whip stitch here. Let's see if I can pull it a little tighter again to where you might not see. Nope. So like down there at the bottom is going to be what it looks more like. So you will see the thread on the front side if you do a whip stitch, but not as much as you see here, because I am indeed pulling it apart so that you can witness what it looks like a little bit better. So there we go. Look at all those seams we did today. So much progress. So many seams. Fantastic. All right. Well, join me back here at...
Let me check.
I don't remember. I have it on my calendar.
5 p.m.
At 5 p.m. And then you will see how I am going to use this fabric and some of the techniques that we just learned to make an apron. So it'll be fantastic. I'm really excited about it. I don't know if I'll be able to get the entire thing done in an hour, but we'll find out. It'll be a great time. But it will be done today, and it will be available for raffle. So if you have trusted me after seeing some of these stitches and want to go ahead and enter that raffle for the apron, you can certainly do so. And if you would like to donate to any of our tiers or anything that we have said before, and I think we're going to go over again, you can do so by going to the link right below me or calling in at the phone number right below me.
And I'd like to thank Terry Fritcher just donated $55.
Yay, thank you.
And Terry says that she's got a raffle for the mystery gift basket.
Ooh.
Good choice, Terry. And $50 to as a donation. Terry says that she lives in Iowa and stumbled across your Facebook page in March. I love all of your programming. I enjoy your acting skills. I learn something every time. I love the trivia quizzes too. Thank you so much, Terry. And since you do love our trivia, be sure to catch us for our World War II trivia with Glenn. That is taking place at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you, everyone. So now that actually boosted us up to 17% of our goal of $3,000. So thank you so much. Now, next up, we have the American Revolution with Glenn. So we are going to get set up for that, so stay with us. And thank you so much, Marie, for that awesome lesson.
Of course.
All right, we'll be right back.
Bye.